Welcome again, everyone, to another Missions Blab. We're excited to be talking today about the conversation, everyday life of a missionary, which is, of course, rainbows and butterflies, unicorns. No, I'm just joking. We're going to be talking about the reality of what it looks like living overseas cross-culturally, and what are some things that happen? What are some things you should be focusing on? What are some things that could deter you from your goal or your vision as you move cross-culturally? So my name is David Joannis. I'm the founder and president of Within Reach Global. Within Reach Global has been working in Southeast Asia for the last nearly 20 years, reaching unreached people groups. Of course, most of you who are here know this. I'm going to post my link, of course, though, withinreachglobal.org. And I also blog at davidjoannis.com. about lots of global missions venture and how you can be involved. And I'm joined today with, let's just call it 4 co-hosts today. Craig, Steve, and Mike. Why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself, Mike, real quick?
Sure. My name is Mike Falkenstein, and I direct a ministry called China Resource Center. And we have projects serving the growth of the church in rural China. So we've been doing rural Bible distribution and rural church building projects, and so that's been a real blessing. Over the last year or so, I've started a new sort of personal venture as well. In fact, David, I was just telling you about our latest recording of our Made for Missions podcast, yes. kind of a venture to mobilize Christians towards the Great Commission, and I think that's how you and I got to know each other, and yes. Kind of the similar heart to. Just make sure all Christians know that the Great Commission is a command for us all, and trying to help people maybe find that sweet spot of Great Commission fulfillment.
Well, when you get a chance here, maybe when the other guys are introducing themselves, pop up a link there for those of
sure.
who are going to be watching the replay. You might want to follow you there on Made for Missions podcast. And Craig, why don't you introduce Steve, go ahead.
I don't know which one to choose.
I think.
Okay.
I think.
There we go.
Craig's trying to make everyone dizzy.
Whoa! Hello.
Yeah,
welcome, Robert. Good to see you.
Yeah, for those who don't know me, I'm Steve Shermer, president of Silk Road Catalyst. We work with unreached people groups and on the Silk Road, which is pretty much Asia and the Middle East. We're currently focusing in on couple of countries in Asia, and this week I'm here at Liberty University during their Global Focus Week as they are just talking about stuff going on around the world and how to be involved, and it's been a pretty active week already.
Awesome. So Craig, maybe you could get into a little bit more. Tell us what is global, well, introduce yourself, but what is Global Focus Week there at Liberty, and why are you there?
Yeah. I'm Craig Osterhus. I work in the Center for Global Engagement, and we're involved in projects around the world, sending our students to various places on short-term trips, on internships, and we also try to help those who are on the field send their kids here and help those who have graduated from here get to the field by some scholarship and grant programs. We celebrate God's work around the world twice a year. During our Global Focus Week, we invite a number of reps from agencies that work around the world, and there's close to 50 agencies represented on our campus this week, and we have a number of activities that are specifically focused on our international work, all kinds of things. And Andrew, my right-hand man, is standing by to report on what is happening down on just 2 floors below us. And Andrew, tell us what's going on.
Yeah, so every day we've been having what's called culture events. And so yesterday, I wasn't able to call in yesterday, but we did crepes. And so we had a bunch of crepes with different fruit and just kind of served it to the students. And then today what we've got going on is it's kind of died down. Earlier we had more people here, but there's just students sitting around doing origami, and so we have different parts where they can learn how to do origami. So I can show you if you want. But
Sure,
they're just
yeah.
it's kind of died down. We're about to close up shop, but they're just down there reading, doing origami, kind of whatever. And then tonight we have an event called Into the Jewish Mind. And so they're just serving food from Israel. And then also I think they're going to have somebody speak from the Center for Judaic Studies here at Liberty.
Very cool.
So, yeah, we've just been doing events every night like that for students to experience different snippets of culture from around the world. So
I was a part of Into the Postmodern Mind was last night. We featured a few countries in Europe. I interrupted you there, David, but just to give you an idea of what was going on, we heard from several countries that we're going to be sending trips to, and getting an idea of the culture background, what it's like to learn the language, what it's like to encounter the different religions and worldviews that are represented in those countries in Europe, and what it's like to make big blunders with the language. We heard some great stories about that. So we serve food. I mean, it's amazing how many students turn out to events where we serve food.
surprising, huh?
Like board games or origami, the numbers are lower. I just haven't figured out what the correlation is yet, but maybe somebody could explain it to me. I don't
Strange stuff.
know. Yeah.
Yeah.
Maybe we'll talk about that in our meeting on Monday.
Okay, that's right. We'll be brief about that.
Yeah.
So, Andrew, in your opinion, I mean, you're right there in the heart of it, Liberty University. Your gauge kind of on students, young people who have a heart for global ventures, maybe wanting to move overseas for a short time, long time. What do you think in general is the heart there right now?
Well, we have a growing department here at Liberty where every year we're getting more and more students who are looking into it and getting excited about global work.
Cool.
And so, every semester this time of the year, we have, it just seems to me at least like an overwhelming amount of students who are at least interested in the world. And we get to meet more and more of our international students. So, it's growing. We're getting more and more people every semester, it seems. Correct me if I'm wrong, Craig, but
I think we are getting some good momentum going, and we're trying to link our TCKs and our international students more. Our international student organization always participates in our Global Focus Week with a Taste of Nations event, where they do all the work and they provide it as a service to the student body, and it's a very popular, very widely participated event. Again, free food. You do pay $2.
$2 for all you can eat. $2 for all you can eat buffet with origami included. Doesn't sound bad to me.
Yeah, that sounds like a deal.
All right.
Well, Andrew, you're awesome. I appreciate you giving us a little glimpse into this every single time. And I mean, I don't know what your heart is for the nations, but I look forward to connecting, maybe hearing more about that sometime. Of course,
Definitely.
we're on Twitter buddies.
Yeah.
You'll have to change that little egg profile so I can see a debonair photo of yourself. But all right, man. Well, thanks so much. You're awesome.
No problem. You guys take care.
Hold on.
Okay. I think it's pretty cool. I mean, there at Liberty, you got this Global Focus Week, hundreds, if not maybe thousands of young people who are being introduced perhaps to cultures for the very first time. Perhaps in many cases, they know more about the world than many people across the States actually do. But it's amazing how many potential and future global workers there are. And our hearts would just be to really captivate on young passion and say, look, the Great Commission is for you, and find a way to plug them in somewhere overseas within Reach Global, China. That was a shameless plug, but somewhere overseas on missions. You know what I mean?
Yep. We're grateful that as we have talked this up among the faculty, we're getting some interest in from our LU online community. These are students, some 100,000 students that study through Liberty University online from all over the world.
Wow.
And so we're promoting through that channel, and we may get some traffic from them today. And hopefully, as your Blab continues, David and Steve, you'll get some participation from those that are doing studies perhaps in the global studies area, or others who just have a heart to understand the world and to make the world impact the world with good news.
Amen. So speaking of that note, Mike is here. He's a co-host today. Steve and I and Mike have been talking about brainstorming, just how we can grow the Missions Blab to include many more organizations, individuals. And I know there are churches nationwide and worldwide who probably would be inspired by conversations like this. So
Yes.
we're excited to see, right, guys, where it's going to head.
Yeah, definitely.
I didn't know the camera was.
And oh, well, yeah, there you are. welcome, Cameron. Welcome, Robert. Got a bunch of people on with us.
Yes.
Oh, they're gone. But wanted to encourage you guys to share this out on Facebook, Twitter. You could go ahead and do that. Ask some questions. We do have some questions prepared, but I kind of want to give a good glimpse of what it is day-to-day life on the mission field. You go on a short-term trip, it's going to be very different from long-term or life overseas.
Mm-hmm.
So should we just jump right in here, guys? I mean, what do you need to do to make it as a long-term global worker? Are there some skills, some habits that you need to know to thrive?
Well, I would.
Ooh, that one.
I keep hearing here at Global Focus Week, a lot of people talking about teams. And so just being, one of the key components, I think, is being on a team. There are a few people out there that can thrive going solo, and I've met some of them, but they're not the majority. So I think, on the top of my list is either going as a team out, or at least once you get there, you're automatically plugged into a team on the ground.
Great point.
So in other words, plays well with others.
Yeah.
Okay.
We need to play nice.
Play nice now. Gone are the days, perhaps, of the Lone Rangers. Today's day and age with tech and ability to move around the world,
Yeah, air travel.
You should be plugged into a team. I think that is a great point, Steve. I think when I first hear those, how do I need to do it? Make it as a cross-cultural worker. You kind of have this individualistic approach, but I love how immediately you bring in the community, the team aspect. Maybe it'll help us dream up a few more things that. Anything else, Mike? You got some ideas?
Yeah, there's two things that come to mind for me just right off the bat. I guess first, and you'd probably think this would be unneeded to say, but certainly a strong calling to the place where you're serving, right? I mean, you can't just be, that'd be kind of cool to do, and let's just go do it. And I think the reason that that's so important is that when things get tough, when you get homesick, when it just gives you something you can lean on and go, God brought me here, and certainly He'll get me through it, right? The other thing that comes to my mind is, and actually when I saw the question, this was the first thing that popped in my mind. It was a couple that we knew who, this was probably late 90s. And so, even in the late 90s, living in Beijing was not, of course, like it is today. I think today it would be much easier, and more modern conveniences and more things that we're used to. And so in that day, we knew a guy who the husband really felt called to go, and his wife was not on board. And he essentially dragged his wife to Beijing, and they tried to do a number of things. The apartment looked more American, quote unquote American. They tried to get the place kind of set up for her, and yet you step out your door and the reality is that you're in Beijing. You live in Beijing now. So I guess the other part is that if you're married, just making sure that both husband and wife have this calling, and have a piece from God anyway, that this whole business of one spouse wanting to go and one really not, and that, I guess that's the other thing. It's just a kind of a piece with your spouse, and making sure that you're both really feeling like, this is something that God's doing.
Yeah, those are awesome ideas. For me, similar, resonating with say what Steve shared and with what you shared. Having a mentor, either on the field there, someone you could kind of shadow along with, as he's been overseas for a while. He knows the ropes. If you don't have, let's say, a team or a mentor there on the field, I think make sure you have good member care, or they call it missionary care. Someone who you could bounce off ideas, struggles. You need basically someone somewhere that you could connect with and share the goods, the bads, the uglies. And I think that's a powerful connection. In my case, I was very blessed to have a team of mentors who kind of showed me the ropes and really, I think, helped propel me to the successes that I've seen over the years,
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I would add the need for flexibility. You're adaptable to changing situations, and you figure out a way to make the best of it. It's obviously cultural adaptability we take that for granted, that's going to be an absolute necessary thing, but also just the flexibility to adjust to the changing team and to realize people's different gifting and what's your best contribution going to be in the needs of that context for that particular time. What is your main focus of work going to be? It could be that over a period of several years, you may change that main focus a few times and tap into different areas of gifting depending on the demands of the situation there. It would be hard to imagine going to one place doing the very same thing all the time for a long period of time, especially if you're working with other people.
That's right. The everyday life of a global worker does shift regularly, and there are unforeseens thrown at you, hurled at you daily. I'm sure you guys have all experienced this. By the way, a good friend of mine, Josh Brown, is actually in the room. I don't know how your internet is today, buddy, but I would love to hear from you on this topic because you've been living in a really unique city. I'm not going to mention the name, but it is actually where I got engaged. Beautiful, unique, small town setting. And I'd like to hear about how your everyday life is. Either if you want to call in now or later, feel free. But we're going to keep going here. If you want to call in, we'll wait for a moment for you. But I'd like to hear from you at some point if you get a chance. Great ideas, guys. Again, I love the practicality of these things because you don't have to go at it alone these days. You shouldn't go at it alone these days unless you're really desiring to be burnt out within a year. I like that too, Steve. You're mentioning accountability.
Yeah, I would add the accountability side of it. I advocate strongly for, there's all kinds of accountability that we can have on the field, but having your local church involved in that accountability, not just patting you on the back, praying over you in a service and sending you off with funds every month, but actually being engaged in what you're doing. But I say that because, especially from a Western standpoint, we're too individualistic and we just want to go where God's called us and you get out of my way or else you're Satan kind of thing. And I think wise.
That's not a generalization.
So I think it's just wise to have that. I went out with originally with a church behind us, but they didn't give us all that kind of support. It was more of a business transaction. And just going through that experience and seeing what friends of ours went through in a similar way, it just got us to the point of knowing that that strong relationship with a church is vital through the whole process. It keeps them involved and helps us stay accountable simultaneously.
I really like that.
I was going to give you some props, Steve, but I can't give props
give
to
yourself.
myself.
Oh, you can't give them to yourself.
Yeah, so Steve is signed in through Craig's handle right now, just because of the way we're doing it there at Liberty. But great points. I'm going to give you props for that. Well, so you guys, I'm already hearing the practicality of these tips, and I think we should just keep moving right along, chugging right along. Why don't we get to the issue of language learning? Okay, you arrive on the field, you do not know what in the world people are saying. Maybe you took a short class on the language before, or you picked up a Lonely Planet somewhere and are struggling through the intonations. I first started learning Chinese from a Mormon friend of mine while I was here in the States. If anyone learns language great, it's the
Really?
Mormons. And yeah, man, they have incredible resources. So he was tutoring me how to learn Chinese while I was studying Chinese in a class as well. And I thought, I was doing pretty good progress. Landed on the field, and immediately I realized it was not practical as much as I thought it was. So it was more like this, and so what about these questions? How long does it take to learn the language, in your guys' opinion?
It's a good question. I think the last that I checked, at least with because I've got my background with the navigators, I think they were saying kind of initially when you go to China, of course, that's my experiences in China. Initially it was just kind of go there for the first 2 years, and your first 2 years are, language study. The last that I heard, they'd actually moved it up to 3. And I think what they just found was, what you really needed to effectively do ministry required that. So, what my experience is that I had my essentially the equivalent of my 2 years in essentially a university classroom learning, and that's absolutely essential, because although you're not learning any quote unquote spiritual terms, or not many, you have to have the foundation of the language, right? You have to learn sentence structure and all of these basic words, whatever the first 1,000 words or something. Yeah, that's right. And the 4 tones, right? So, and then you can add in after that. There was a group that had then that had made some workbooks that then allowed you to go through. Okay, so if you're for example, if you're going through a Bible study in the book of John, here's the terms that you're going to run across if you're doing Bible study with a Chinese friend. I mean, after you got that first 2 or 3 years, then after that you can begin to add the terminology that you're going to need to actually do ministry. So I don't know if that's
which is a different, which is a little bit different set. Yes, I think there you are, Josh. Yeah. I hope that didn't cut out. I hope that was the end of your thought there, Mike.
Yeah. So anyway, I don't know if that's the same with all languages, or obviously I just have the experience.
No, I can hear me and David, but I can't hear anybody else.
Oh, okay. We hear you.
Okay.
But then you just got a real poor signal here, Josh, and we see audio only. But maybe refresh your browser, or you want to try to say something? I can't hear you right now.
Oh,
he's gone. Maybe he's refreshing his browser. That's fine.
I'll speak from another part of the world.
Sure.
I learned French in high school and college. Studied it for all 4 years of high school, and then 4 semesters in college with conversation and literature and stuff, and then went on to Haiti. My wife was fluent in Creole, and she knew French really well also. And I went into Haiti just pretty well tooled, I guess, in some ways. But I had about a month of daily tutoring, 5 days a week for a month. And then that was what the mission kind of set up for me, as this is what you're going to do to get your start. But it took me maybe a few months after that before I felt like I could converse and be, pretty safe and not dangerous, with the language. I think when you learn stuff early, you can be dangerous, and when you get too confident too soon, and that's when all the funny stories come up, as far as the faux pas and stuff. But I was blessed to kind of have that type of preparation. I really did not choose French for the purpose of serving in Haiti in the future. I had very different reasons, like being able to pick up girls, because I thought they'd be impressed with French rather than Spanish, like what everybody else does. Yeah. So, but interesting how God used that, and it came in handy later on. And so, yeah, my hat's off to you guys who learn Mandarin. I've been to China twice, and wow, what a difference in terms of even just the philosophy and approach to language between a Western European language like French and Mandarin. Just so different. You know, of course, the characters, even the way, the whole approach to language. So you guys are amazing.
Well, you know, I'm a firm believer that maybe not 100% of people, but a very high percentage, if you do it the right way or find a tool that works for you, you can actually thrive and succeed at the language you're trying to learn. There's different blocks, and I have a bunch of blogs on davidjoannes.com, the hardest to easiest languages to learn. Surprisingly, Spanish I found completely different and difficult, but I did well with Chinese. Perhaps that was because my calling was there. I mean, in a moment, I do think we need to all at least have one story of a horror story of how our language failed us. I've got many, but I posted a link up above here. Let me see if it's still there. It's somewhere above. I'll just post it a year without English. These guys went all over the world, and this particular episode, I believe, is in China. It is so incredible how they just immerse themselves into the language and force them. They would not speak English with other expats, with other foreigners. They spoke Chinese with Chinese. And even those people want to speak English with them, they didn't go to English corners. The progress they make live in like 3 months or 2.5 months is pretty exceptional. Perhaps they are the exception, but I think you need, as you find a tool that works for you. For example, I was homeschooled. Okay, never stepped foot in a public school my whole life. Don't even have a degree to prove my sophisticated intellect. But a self-study system works better for me. So I used to go to class, and this is 1997, 1998. I would learn 50 new words every day, 5 days a week, Monday to Friday. I studied in class for 22 hours a week. I would write Chinese characters on my hand so that I could take them outside and practice my words. I went out to a market one day to buy some, couldn't remember the word. I was trying to buy cucumbers, and there was 2 characters. It was Huang Gua, but I forgot the pronunciation of the first character. So it was something Gua. I was like, 你们这儿有没有? Do you have any? And I guessed at the first character. I wanted it to be cucumber, Huang Gua, and I said, 傻瓜, which means a stupid idiot or a stupid melon. Do you guys have any stupid idiots here today? And they're laughing their heads off. And I keep repeating it over and over, 傻瓜, because I think my intonations are wrong. Are there any idiots here? Any idiots? Well, there's only one idiot there that day. It was me until I realized it's Huanghua. And but did I ever make that mistake any day after that? Never again.
No.
I mean, I knew clearly how to say cucumber and how to say idiot, and I never switched the two. So mistakes are going to be made, but keep at it. And I think everyone can really adequately learn a language, at least to communicate the message of the gospel. Perhaps not rocket science, but that may not be your field anyway.
Yeah, so immersion,
I think the immersion.
Yeah.
Yep, we're thinking the same exact thing. The two of us here. Immersion is all. It's what it's all about. That's where your proficiency is going to come.
Yes. Yeah. I like that. I know that, Josh, you're having struggles kind of, you keep popping in and out of the room. I really would like to hear from Josh because he's been in China for, gosh, I can't remember how long, maybe 3 or 4 years. And, he just recently joined our team, but we'll continue going here. How long does it take to learn a language? I do think within a year to a year and a half, you'll be able to converse quite clearly, with people. Again, I'm speaking from Chinese, so that may be faster for other languages. So is language learning a full-time job, you guys?
Oh yeah, I mean, even after you think you've got it. I mean, they always say, the moment you think you're fluent in Mandarin, you've got to rethink it because you've got a lot more to learn.
Yeah.
And for me, Mandarin was a lot easier than Spanish. And German. I'm married a Puerto Rican and I can't speak Spanish. My ancestors are German and I made D's in college in German. And then I go to China and I figure out I was actually made for Mandarin.
Wow.
But, I saw a lot of different people, and I think the time it takes to learn is definitely going to be different. If you're older, I think it's well known that the older you are, the harder it is to learn languages. Our minds just don't click as well as when you're younger. And so just taking all that in consideration. But I agree, like with the post that David put up, the year without English, the more you can immerse yourself, the quicker it'll take. So if you don't immerse yourself, you're just going to lag.
Yeah. I just lost a thought. I had it for a moment ago. Sorry, go ahead. That
is the first time on Missions Blab that David.
This is a I'm a blabber. Okay, I'll admit it.
Yeah, I talk about the dependence on translators for a minute. When in that first year that we were in Haiti, I was invited to give devotions at an area Bible school, and so I was told that there would be a translator there. So we got up to our living place probably beginning of September, and so this is, I think, November, when I was invited to give a series of devotionals during a week there. And they said they would provide a translator. And so as I spoke in English and he translated, I could tell, because I knew enough Creole to realize he was not translating what I was saying properly. And so I was correcting my translator on the spot. And it was, it felt a little awkward. I was kind of embarrassed for him, but I knew that he was not getting what I was saying. So I went home to my wife and I told her about this. And so I said, you need to come and be my translator tomorrow, because this other guy, he's just not strong enough in English to really know what I'm talking about. So she came and she translated for me the next day. And but when she was translating, I was listening and I was saying, no, that's not how I would say it in Creole. And so I was correcting her translation. And she told me at the end of that, she said, you're on your own, buddy. Don't depend on a translator anymore. So it was all a matter of just taking off the training wheels. So and the next day, Wednesday, sure enough, I took a little more time. I prepared the words in Creole and did it. And, I may have been on or off. I don't know. But that was what I needed to just kind of get on my own. And from then on, it was just like, okay, we're going, we're functioning. Awesome. And I don't need the translation.
I love that. That's a learn by immersion thing as well. I'm getting a real feedback by the way you guys.
Forcing yourself to do it when you might want to just lean on the training wheels instead.
Yeah, I've done that many times where I was speaking English, because we have a different group of people speaking English than Chinese. Translate for myself. It's exhausting, but it's also quite exciting as well. By the end of the day, though, you are spent.
Yeah, it's hard on the mind, and it's taxing.
It is.
Right.
For sure.
But all that to say, coming back to that point, I do think if you were going to be a cross-cultural worker, a missionary overseas, I do think and believe that if you focus on the language, you will make large success. I'm not talking only about extroverts who like to just go out and be mingling with the crowd. Regardless of your personality, extrovert, introvert, make sure you are opening your mouth, making mistakes, so that either yourself or someone else can correct them, and you'll thrive in your language learning. We have pastors who come and we host these underground trainings in China. They often whisper right up as they're getting on the microphone and say, "How do you say? How do you say it in English now? How do you say praise the Lord in Chinese?" And I say, 感谢主, 感谢主, or we'll say 赞美主. And they'll get up on the microphone and say, 赞美主, the difference being 主, Lord, and 主, pig. And they say, praise a pig, and then there's silence and a pin drop. And so are you going to make mistakes? There is no doubt in your language learning. I've got some horrific stories. I'll save them for another day because Steve's already told me I talk too much.
Hey, David, just a kind of tag on to that, I have two things that came to my mind. One is, I mean, you've essentially just said it, but and saying it another way, don't be afraid to make mistakes. My experience was when we lived in Tianjin, I was in the classroom in the mornings, would go home for lunch, and then a lot of afternoons would just be there was a group of taxi drivers that were out in front of our apartment complex. And actually, besides actually getting to become pretty good friends with some of these guys, they were just so kind. I mean, they were just kind of sitting there anyway, waiting for the next, person to come around. And so I just sit there, and I mean, at first it was in Chinese, stuff like, that guy is on a bike. And I mean, just simple sentences, but I was practicing and making mistakes, and they were more than happy to correct me. And actually, as it turned out, in that case, the taxi drivers, as we all know, they're the ones that know the real local language, right? And so,
yes. When you say the local language, you're talking about, dirty terminology. 天津话. Okay, I was thinking 脏话.
Yeah, so because even within Mandarin there are different accents to the language. So sure. Yeah, so I guess the other thing is, as I've thought about this, it brought to my mind just the encouragement that I'd love to give to those who might be watching, just to say, if you feel called to a place overseas, go full in on the language, because there is a group of people that we knew then, and even now you see these groups in China anyway, who are, they're they stay within the expat community largely, speaking English largely. And I have friends that, they've been in China for 10 years and their Chinese is still not really all that good. And, while they may be doing a job there where they're primarily using English, I would just say, gosh, if you're gonna sacrifice and go to a place, learn the language, because it opens up so many additional opportunities and for ministry. And don't be stay with the expat community exclusively type person. I think it's you're there. I mean, God's called you there. Go for it.
You can go with the locals.
Yeah, I agree with Mike. There's a lot of, I keep coming in contact with younger people, and they just want to jump into it. They want to go get a job as a tent maker. They just want to go win the world for Jesus without thinking about the steps of actually how you're going to be effective in your ministry.
If you don't know how to say Jesus in Chinese yet, right?
That's right.
I forgot.
No, not you. I'm saying them.
So Mike's right on. You've got to invest in it, like invest in any kind of education, and just get it over with, because you'll regret it later on if you don't.
Mm-hmm. And on that topic, I mean, we've been talking about language a long time. Maybe we should move on. Why don't we move to adjusting to a new culture? Okay, since we're basically essentially talking about that, you're adjusting to a new culture. Whoops, I was about to post that, but it didn't. Tips and tricks. How do you adjust? I mean, we all know the person who's there with his camera, click, 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 and everything is new and exotic, and you're so green, it's just harsh on the eyes of everyone watching. What are some tips and tricks to adjust to a new culture, to accept what it is, to maybe not ask why instead of asking, why not? And yeah, Josh, feel free to call in if you're setting things up there. All right. Thoughts about that, you guys? Or maybe Josh could help us recall those early nostalgic memories of his experience. Hey, buddy, how you doing?
I'm good. Hopefully this works better today.
Yeah, we see you now. Good to see you.
Seems good right now.
Okay, good. I basically disconnected everyone else that's using the internet in this building, so...
Good. You unplugged everyone, huh?
Okay. Well, I was listening to the language, and I wanted to say a little bit about that. We've lived in, my family and I have lived in China for 2.5 years, or a little less than 2.5 years. And I would say that my language probably isn't as good as it should be, but I also started in class in because I had a student visa, so I had to be in class, and I really disliked class. I think I'm somewhat like David, that I'm a self-learner. Although I think I learned a lot. Some of the things that you learn in class, I don't find very useful. And living not in Beijing, you learn a lot of Beijing Hua in class, which isn't very useful in our city because no one speaks it. So I did not appreciate it class so much.
Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off there.
No, that's okay. And then I went with a language tutor and could kind of go with more what local people say and local phrases and stuff like that. And also the things that I felt like I needed to learn, and that was a lot more useful. But again, like you were saying, you have to get out and use it, and that is always a challenge because because I teach English, most of the time I spend with people who also speak English, and so it's a constant challenge for me to push myself and to get outside of that world.
Sure. Yeah. Then on to culture. I mean, I know, how long have you been in China now? I can't remember. 4 years? Longer.
I've been in 2 years. I also lived in China 16 years ago. I lived in China for a year. So, of course, China's changed a lot since then. So for me, the thing that I like to do to get out, I really enjoy like exploring new places, and I think getting out and just being in the culture and finding things, and for myself, really helps me. Some people like a lot of help from other people. I prefer to try to do things as much as I can on my own. Obviously, there's some times where I need help of someone who speaks the language better than me, but as much as I can, I like to try to pay my bills myself and figure out things myself, and that, I think, really has helped me adjust as much as I can.
Yeah, fully not pay bills.
David's connection is kind of weak at this point.
Really?
I think for culture, a real practical element is to food. You know, just simply being able to have meals together with people, and
Cockroaches for Walt.
That's right.
Being willing to try, you know, the local food. I mean, that is an honoring kind of a thing that automatically builds relationships. We every place we go, I mean, especially if it's in Asia, I guess, where we were kind of advised, don't ask what it is, just taste it. If you don't like it, it's okay. You can,
That's right.
You can refuse to eat a lot of it. You don't have to eat a lot of it, but try it. And maybe if they tell you what it is afterwards, then that's great. You can just kind of store that away. But
store that away.
And in obviously in Asia, there's going to be some more unique things that we might not find in other places in the world. But I love Haitian food. I just absolutely love it. Anytime I can have a meal with rice and beans and plantains, and it's phenomenal. So I think they really, so if I love their food, they're going to love to cook for me. And then if they love to cook for me, then I'm going to get to eat more, and I'm going to love it. And I'm going to, thank them and praise them. And it builds that rapport. And then it enables me to see in the, what the value of food is and how meals are done. What's a portion size? What's a standard meal etiquette? How often do they eat in a day?
Do they have big gulps?
Well, I tell you, at a wedding reception, a Haitian wedding reception, you will not believe the size of the plates that people load up.
Okay.
And but it's that could be like the meal of the day too.
Okay.
It could be the one meal of the day. So, but it's a festive celebration atmosphere, and it's just accepted that this is going to be a big meal. So the guest list is going to probably be limited and stuff. So you're gonna find a lot of culture surrounds food, and that's probably one of the most enjoyable ways to engage.
Yeah. I actually like a really good question here by Carlton on this topic. Why is cultural immersion valuable? I mean, this is a great question because it says, I ask because I don't think I would reject or treat with more credibility someone's message simply because they didn't embrace American culture. Why do we think people in China treat other people differently in that regard? Just curious. Basically, why is cultural immersion valuable?
Well, I think it demonstrates love and concern for the other person. That,
okay.
I believe that the way you have understood the world is a starting point for our conversations, and then we can learn from each other. And I've got good news that I want to share with you, but I want to be sure that I can share it in a way that you'll understand and receive it, and not feel like I'm trying to persuade you to my Americanized or Westernized worldview. I believe that when God made the world and when God made the people scatter in Genesis 11, of the nations at the Tower of Babel, I think that was in his plan to create variety all around the world. And we can celebrate that diversity by affirming the worldviews that we see in one another, and coming to understand life better from a different perspective gives us just a richer view and a richer vocabulary to share the good news that we have.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's a great response. And since we're kind of short on time, I'm just going to move into this really quick here. Steve or Craig actually came up with this question. Bonus, ding, 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 ding. How do you figure out how to share the gospel in a relevant way in a foreign culture? Since we're talking about that, we're talking about cultural. What are we talking about here? Cultural immersion. We're talking about getting rid of the thought or the theory of cultural imperialism. How then do you learn to share the gospel in a relevant way?
Well, David, I have,
for example, sorry, go ahead, Mike. You go ahead.
Oh,
first.
no, that's fine. That's fine. I think I've kind of got a thought that may get into Carlton's question a little bit and what you've just asked.
Yeah, okay.
I just think, and my experience with this, I mean, that I was doing the research on Christian missionaries in China in the 1800s. Of course, early on, a lot of those people did kind of what I was talking about before, right? They kind of created their own little, mini English culture right there in China, and they built they built the homes in that way, and they, with the idea that certainly our culture, our language is, way better than these, primitive Chinese, at least from their perspective. And it wasn't until guys like Hudson Taylor came along who were really these first ones to go. I mean, think about just the 180 switch that a guy like Hudson Taylor, did. I mean, he ate with the people. He kind of yeah, I mean, he saw their culture as valuable, if not more valuable than his own. And boy, isn't that just kind of, yeah, I mean, there's just so much of even the gospel that's kind of wrapped into that, right? I mean,
becoming all things to all men. Right? Yeah,
that's right. And so it was really no reason that he was just so much more effective. And so in terms of, why is cultural immersion valuable? Certainly a big part of that is, boy, those are the people that you're wanting to reach, and you're showing them honor and showing them that their culture has value. And I don't know that there's a lot of, in terms of the platform that you want to try to have to share the gospel, you probably don't have that in nearly as nearly as high as you would, if you met them right where they were at, I think. So.
Yeah, hopefully we're doing a decent job of answering that question. Carlton's always got a deeper question beyond the question, which I always really like. And seriously, but okay, yeah. I wanted to, okay, let me ask you guys this first. Do you have more time? You have 6 minutes, I believe, in that room. Is that correct? Or you have longer today?
Yeah, I don't see anybody lining up just yet, so we might
all right.
longer. Yeah.
what we'll do probably is once you guys leave, because I think this has an opportunity to take off in many different directions. If you guys have to go, I'll stay on for maybe another half hour or so. Anyone else who wants to join me. I think Josh is getting ready to grow that beard out, pretty epic, braided, shave the top of his hair like Hudson Taylor. I don't know.
There you go.
I'm gonna try.
Confirmation, maybe.
I don't know about shaving the head though.
Okay. All right. Well. All right. You'll go halfway in. Yay, says Carlton. He's is happy that I'm actually going to stay and not ditch him this time. As far as language goes, there's an adjusting to new culture. You got food. You got a cultural values that are very different. For example, we come from a very wrong, right, guilt, innocence culture. Then suddenly you move into a honor, shame, or in many cases, perhaps Haiti, fear. What is it, Craig? Fear, power structure. And so your whole means of transportation through language, through culture is going to be widely different. These are things that I would encourage you to follow the guys that are here on Blab on Twitter. We have our websites that are made available that we talk, I think, in detail about a lot of the stuff. We don't have all the answers, but I think there's a lot of unique things out there. Shall we move on, you guys? What about getting along with your team? Okay. You ever met someone who doesn't quite get along well with the team that they're on? Yeah, we were all them, or we've all been there, right?
Yeah. In fact, I've heard, I don't know the exact stats on this, David, but I've heard that kind of discord within teams is one of the greatest things that have people, come off the missions field. And so, yeah, I mean, it's a big deal.
Yeah, I agree. Missionary attrition is at an all-time high, not because necessarily the language is difficult, but because people are a real pain. Steve, you got to go?
Yep.
All right.
Okay, we'll
I
see
said
ya.
people are a real pain, and he leaves.
Bye,
Well,
Steve.
whatever. We'll catch you soon, buddy. He's got a previous engagement that he's got to go to. He's not a pain. He's a really great guy. Another $5 for Dave. Basically, Carlton said every time I correct Steve or say something to him that in that manner, he's going to donate $5. I think we're up to $30 right now, Carlton. Should I make the
Nice.
donate button available for you? But Josh, for example, we just linked up, partnered together. We're on the same team now. How's your experience been in the past with teams, or how are you hoping that it will change this time around?
In the past, we haven't been on a lot of teams. Before we joined with you, we were kind of on I would say, a loose team, and not any really big problems. But it's only been 2 years. It takes a while to really get into it. When I was in China before 16 years ago, I was on I had a partner, and that was actually really challenging for me. I was right out of college, and he was in the retirement age. And so for us to try to, he kind of saw me, I was younger than one of his children. And so the dynamics on that team were very difficult. I felt like, being fresh out of college, I knew what I was doing. And him being in retirement age, he felt like he had the right to tell me what to do. And so it was a real challenge for me and for him, I think.
Yeah.
I don't know who made the choice to put us together, but
multi-generational are can be a real issue, because there's just unless you can all kind of come to some understandings as to how the family needs vary, the perspectives, the philosophy, the approach, the paradigms. I mean, all of that stuff can kind of clash, and you have to have some safe space to talk it through and work it through with some good leadership in order to keep the peace sometimes. Or you've got people that just say, "Hey, I don't belong here. I need to leave." And in some respects, I mean, we were that 20-something couple with the baby and felt like nobody understood us. And I think if I went back, I would have probably prepared. I mean, if I were to do it over again, I would have hoped for some better training to anticipate what we were going to see, and then figure out some skills and some ways to just work better together. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think when you add to
Yeah,
that,
I mean, it is.
go ahead.
Go ahead.
I think when you add to that
I don't.
multicultural teams, which we're just starting to be a part of, and assuming that you're coming into this culture, and I think sometimes you assume, well, the people that are part of my team understand me because they're also foreigners in this country, but they don't even always have the same culture, even if they come from America. Come from very different places. Recently, we had a Russian family also in our kind of working with us, and not having worked with them, I thought of things that surprised us, and so if you add on that to it, it sometimes makes it difficult.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, that's a question I think that Craig, you had, right? What's better, a team of Americans or mixed teams?
Right. The research from the Cultural Intelligence Center suggests that a monocultural team is more productive than a diverse team. However, if that diverse team is coached and learns about cultural intelligence, then that diverse team is way stronger than the homogeneous team. So, just the awareness as far as and being able to work together to the cross-cultural understandings and insights into how people think, what their values are, and such. Just with a little bit more of awareness and acceptance in that, then you have a lot of strength that can be in a multicultural team, just because of the diversity of perspective and being able to understand things from different points of view. But it's way easier to work with people that always agree with you. Not always safer, more productive. It's just easier. Right.
I really like that thought, because not only are you coming from an all American or all Western, whatever your culture is, team, trying to understand culture, you're already being ingrained through the nuances of culture within your team. Therefore, it's less of a hurdle to jump to your target or your host country, I would imagine, right?
Mm-hmm. Sure, definitely.
I love that. Excellent point. I also like Walt had a question on here, said, how about helping kids adjust to food, language, culture? And again, oops, I think I got stuck. Am I still there?
Yeah, you are.
You guys see me? Okay, sorry. I lulled for a minute there. He said, how about helping kids adjust to food, language, and culture? This is a whole nother conversation about TCKs or third culture kids.
It really is.
That is really, it's not easy. It's not an easy thing to accomplish. Imagine how difficult it is for an adult with all our experience, whether you're 20 or 60, and then you have children. Of course, they traverse culture and the nuances of culture much easier initially, but there is so many things that need explaining. And you guys got any tips or websites? I know there's a bunch of expat help websites out there, or TCK sites, third culture kids, that are really great. I'll search for one as you guys have any thoughts to share. Yeah, it was probably a little bit more relevant a while ago when I missed it. Sorry about that, Walt.
I think the enthusiasm of the parents, kind of translates into the kids. And the ability to, what we find meaningful is to engage in those relationships. Our kids pick up on that, and they want to do the same. And then also when we see our kids engaging in those relationships with other kids, then that gives us an avenue to, like I was talking the other day about connecting with the parents. So, it's definitely a feedback, kind of a cyclical thing. Conversely, you can imagine if the parents are pretty closed to building those relationships, the kids will pick up on that and adopt that as their kind of default posture. And, that continues to isolate and kind of undermine what you're there to accomplish anyway. So, it
could also be very rewarding, right? To see your children thriving within this culture in a very unique way you didn't really expect, right?
Say that again. I'm sorry. I got distracted.
I was saying it's also not, I think there's many positives that are included with a child who traverses cultures when you see them thriving in a culture, and it makes it all worth it, right?
Oh, yeah. That's so encouraging.
Yeah.
Because you're taking a risk when you're going to another country and you're leading your family, your children there, and you wonder how they're going to adjust and whether you can protect them from, the downsides of this in many cases an unknown environment. But when you see them dive in, learn language faster than you, which is probably going to happen. Those kids are just extremely adaptable to language. They have, those language abilities still very sharp in their intellect at that age. Then that's really encouraging, and it kind of breathes new wind into your sails as you see them engaging and being excited to be there.
Yeah, Carlton, you're here, but before I bring you on here, I just wanted to say to Walt,
somebody's echoing very badly.
Suddenly I have a real bad echo. I don't know if that's just me, you guys, or not. But I don't know. I wanted to encourage you and say, when your children move overseas, yeah, there's going to be some initial shock perhaps. But honestly, we speak English in Tagalog at home with my daughter. She speaks in Thai to her Thai grandmother. She's 3 years old, by the way. And she's growing in so many ways. She wise people, Sawadee ka. And we go to the temples with her and she takes her shoes off. And it's a really fun time to see her thriving in this culture. And so I think it is great. Less of a concern that we make it, perhaps specifically as fathers. I know I want my child to be safe and protected, but really they will thrive in that. Sorry to cut you off there, Carlton. Welcome.
Oh, you didn't cut me off at all. I hadn't even got started yet. Hey, everybody. I had another question, a little bit different than the one I asked before, but you mentioned this, I think, earlier on, and I think we're still on topic here. When you talk about cultural relativism, and I think Mike, I don't know if it was Mike or it was the guy sitting in the lower right seat, who was kind of talking about the fact that embracing another culture is at least in part a way to make them feel good about their culture. I have heard, right now, I do have friends who are Christians who, when you talk to them, will extol the virtues of a society based on Christian principles, as opposed to a culture that is not based on Christian principles. It seems to me
I hear what you're saying.
that kind of a person definitely has a bit of colonialism going on. I mean, they clearly believe that at least, if not their particular culture, at least certain cultures are qualitatively better than other cultures. Is that common? Is that something that's common with missionaries? And I guess, how does that get resolved? And what is your recommendation for? Should that be resolved? Should it be resolved by backing down on sort of your assertion? Should it be resolved by simply trying to change the culture that you're in to fit the one that you like the best? What's the best approach there?
Before I answer that, or just come up with this, I like Walt's question. I think the debate is moving closer and closer to overseas work. Confirmation for you, buddy. So
yes, I'm going to China with Dave, and every time Dave starts talking, I'm going to go, there's another possibility, and then I'll be right behind him. I will. I'm kidding. Go ahead, Dave.
I have lots of atheist friends in China, but you're not going to be my only one. I wanted to address that because I think, Carlton, if I'm not mistaken, we were in a room together, a month ago, maybe 3 weeks ago, and you asked something similar to a guy who was in somewhere in the Middle East. And he said, well, I don't usually gravitate towards words of and et cetera, because it doesn't express my Christian value.
Dave, you're really breaking up. Is he breaking up for everybody else or just me?
Yeah, it's breaking up a lot.
Sounds like you're underwater, Dave.
Your audio only.
I'm going to refresh you guys. Oh, really? You keep going. I'll refresh.
Okay.
Even the audio isn't that good.
Right. So, Mike, do you want to take that?
Yeah, I didn't quite understand your question, Carlton, so I can't really address that.
Well, that's always a safe answer. It buys you some more time there. This is a negotiating tactic. My question was, for example, I have a friend who's a Christian, okay, and he's forever extolling the virtues of any society that is based on a Christian foundation, right? That he would tell you that, for example, not only the U.S., but he will tell you that the U.S. is qualitatively a better society because of our our basis in Christianity, as opposed to a culture in some other country, where it didn't form and it didn't grow up around Christianity. And I'm curious because that, to me, sounds very much like colonialism, right? And it would seem that kind of a person who believes that the U.S., for example, is qualitatively better as a society than others would want to transfer that to another country when they go there, that they would want to make that country like theirs.
Mm-hmm. So by the virtue of the culture itself being so-called superior, we feel like we ought to export that to less fortunate.
Yeah, and I don't mean to imply that the person is doing that in the wrong spirit. I think that if he truly believes that, then clearly that should be what he should be doing, right?
Yeah. Well, it all depends on how you approach the question, whether you think that culture is inherently good or evil, superior or inferior. I think another way to approach it is a culture. Does culture have the capacity to become more closer to its ideals than it now is? And I think there are a number of things. I mean, from my graduate studies in anthropology, the anthropologist who taught my classes certainly was a Christian, but he said, as an anthropologist, I say, based on research, that those societies that embrace a Christian worldview do better than those that don't, or that they retain animism and things like that. There is something that our message brings that is redemptive to culture as a whole, and but our mistake comes when we assume that we've understood our message, and the way we've understood it within a cultural context is the way that everybody ought to understand it. It's the wrapping, the American, the Western, Judeo-Christian kind of wrapping that should then be exported elsewhere, like you were saying. I think what we have to do is step back and say, okay, we believe that God has left himself a witness in each culture that he allowed to create, that he created when the people were dispersed at the Tower of Babel. And so what are the elements within each of those cultures that have their redemptive completion within this message that we're bringing? The task then for us is to look closely at those cultures that we see, find those redemptive qualities. I would refer you to Don Richardson and Peace Child as one example, where he found a way to communicate the gospel message within a cultural paradigm that they understood, namely the notion of the peace child. He found, as he observed this ritual between two warring tribes, he found that this is a perfect illustration of what Jesus did when he came to earth. And so that's something that would be very, it may be of interest to you.
So are we saying, I think I understand, but let me repeat it back just to make sure. Are you saying then that the ideal that was being spoken of earlier about embracing the culture that you find yourself in is its value is to increase the likelihood that you can communicate well the gospel, but that on the other side to that is still the notion that bringing Christianity to a country where it does not currently exist will ultimately be a transformative experience in terms of changing their culture?
Yes, absolutely. I would agree with both.
Yes.
Both pieces. I think you articulated that very well.
Yeah, me too.
So yeah, I would definitely go along with that.
Okay. Interesting.
Yeah, there have been so many erroneous mistakes on the part of the missionary or the so-called missionaries who are actually advancing some sort of colonialist advance. And so therefore, even when you use the word missionary, it's got some strange and perhaps negative connotations. And so I like what you were saying, though, Craig, almost enhancing a culture to its utmost value rather than changing it to fit the American. God forbid we make more Americans.
Right,
we don't
right.
have to
Definitely.
pass on.
But I don't know if that's I know I'm putting words in your mouth, David, and I know I don't have this experience that you have. But to me, that this is still very much though what it ultimately feels like. And I'm not saying that you want to put a Burger King on every corner, but
Well, I wouldn't be opposed to that.
But it still does feel. In other words, right? I mean, I'm trying to imagine myself in the role as a missionary, where my culture is clearly an American culture. This is where I grew up. Okay, if I believe that my culture is good as a result, at least in part, of its Christian foundation, then, as Craig agreed with earlier, then I think that bringing this to another culture, which doesn't have that as a foundation, I think I would have to believe that it is going to transform it in some way to be very, I hate to say American-like, and I know that there is that we can maybe distinguish the religion from, Americanism, but I think that from my mind, if I grew up in America, that is clearly what I would see sort of as the goal, because I can't imagine turning it into a German culture or turning it into an Australian culture, because I don't have any experience there. So I am going to think it's going to transform into more of an American culture.
Well, just take the worship service, for example. Are they playing pipas and arhus, or are they playing the electric guitar and a drum set, right?
Right, but that's superficial. But now, okay, let me ask you: is China, and correct me if I'm wrong, I don't know, is China a class-based society in a similar way to the way India is?
In a similar but a much more subtle way, yes.
Okay, so when we talk about bringing it to its fruition to the best that it can be, for example, are we talking about, in other words, is a class-based system in any way run contrary to the ethics or of the Bible and of what Jesus taught? In other words, as an American, I think we would probably see that as being counter to what Jesus taught. But if we see, but if we agree with that, then we would have to, right, but then we would really have to want to transform or change their culture, not to be a better class-based society, but to be a classless-based society. And that's a fundamental change.
Right. And,
well, as long as we're not moving towards a democratic society, which also is not biblical, right?
Yeah, we have to be critical.
Baby steps.
At our own and be willing to question our own understanding. But yes, I think according to what the scripture says, there is no Jew nor Greek, no male to female, but you're all one in Christ. And so there is some very good biblical basis anyway, and from historical, the first century church as a model to say that we would have a much more inclusive, even between Jews and Gentiles, that Ephesians 2 talked about how Christ's death on the cross tore down the wall, the barriers of hostility between those, and it's brought the two into one. The danger comes when we diagnose and then prescribe what a culture needs to do, and instead of allowing the gospel to take root, grow, and change from within. If we try to change from without and just simply prescribe, this is what's wrong with your culture, we see clearly that you are not doing what the Bible says, and so you need to change. That we're just talking about behavior modification, and we're talking about external conformity to some kind of a standard, rather than the new life of God springing up from within as people understand in their own language what this message means and how it transforms from within, and suddenly they now instinctively, by the working of God in their own hearts, live it out.
Isn't there a so what's the word I'm looking for here, though? Isn't there a risk? I guess I'll call it that. Because I think, David, you talked about this a little bit before. It feels very much like the Jews and the Romans of the first century, in that while we're talking about a biblical classless society, fundamentally, okay, clearly that is going to have that notion, however it is introduced, whether gently or forcefully, that notion is going to have political ramifications. Because clearly, if you have a political entity that is based on a class-based system, to undermine that notion of class-basedness, is that a word? Is clearly threatening or potentially threatening to those people in power. But I have another question in the back of my head, David. Would you permit me one more off-topic question? I'm sorry. It's
Sure.
been nagging me, and I haven't been able to get to it.
Okay, since you're going that question, I just like to point out Walt's point here. We're not only talking in the American to the world missionary structure here. I mean, you got Chinese and others. As far as going back to the everyday life of missionary thought, these are a global missionary force being sent out who are having to deal with this, the bringing of their own culture into a different setting. So I just wanted to appreciate his thoughts there real quick. And Carlton, yeah, sure. Go ahead, buddy.
This is one that I was going to do in the other. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead, David.
I'm just going to say, Craig, it looks like you got to go here.
Yeah.
You got to go.
Yes. I really enjoyed it, though, Carlton. Good to meet you face to face, sort of.
Same here.
And
Mike. Thanks, Craig.
We'll be in touch.
Appreciate Craig, take care. We'll see you tomorrow, buddy.
Okay. All right.
Okay, so
for those of you guys who don't know, Carlton, I'm so sorry. I keep cutting you off. I was just going to make mention of.
Nope, go ahead.
I was just going to make mention. That was Craig, and he's at Liberty University. We're going to be having these conversations. We've been since Monday, all the way until tomorrow is the last scheduled one at Liberty University. And you could subscribe, by the way, here to tomorrow's Mission Blab. And that is the last time I'm going to interrupt Carlton. Go ahead.
No, that's quite all right. And Walt, I'm going to see. I see that. I'll give me 1 second. I'll come back to that. I'll watch that YouTube. This is what I was going to ask the other day, but you were kind of involved in a different topic. I don't know any Christian that would disagree with the statement that they should be a good steward of the funds or the money that God has given them. Should money be donated to missionaries based on productivity? How many souls did you win? You get $100. You only won 2 souls. You get $30. It sounds kind of silly, right? And I understand the counter argument, right, that you really can't necessarily be held responsible for how somebody else reacts. But nonetheless, though, the person giving the money, I would think, would want to give it where it will, in fact, do the most good, which I think basically translates to the most conversions in general, if you're a missionary. So do missionaries do you get rated that way? Do people allocate money that way? Do you have to demonstrate success in conversions in order to have somebody keep you out in the field?
So it's a great thought. And I would say, should I say parentheses, unfortunately, people kind of give blindly sometimes.
Okay.
I mean, you got all different kinds of people. You have the career missionary who's been there for a number of years, who's been sowing and seeing progression and growth, and then perhaps a lot more breakthrough than others. Then you got the passionate young person who goes on a single short-term trip, hasn't been time tested or culture tested. But I don't think most of the time people look at that criteria. No. And is it a good thing or a bad thing? I would hope that people who sow into something want to see that their finances are making, if you want to call it an eternal investment, if you're going to, like I always say, invest into some stock on Vanguard, you want to watch it up and down every day. And so, but I would say, parentheses, unfortunately, people don't look at that criteria, and I'm not sure why. Mike looks.
What about you, Mike?
Yeah,
Mike's got a thought on that one. I can see.
Well, yeah. I mean, it's at least from my perspective, it's a complex situation, right? I mean, on one hand, you certainly don't want to be contributing to someone who's, I mean, there are on the kind of the far end, there are the horror stories, and I've only heard of a few of them, fortunately, but there are a couple of these horror stories where churches and individuals are giving to a family in Africa, and they collect the money, and they were talking about Americans here in Africa, and it wasn't until like 10 years later finally one of the church staff went to visit kind of what they were doing. And turns out, they just go out to the bush and take pictures from time to time. And, they really weren't doing anything. And so clearly in those kinds of situations, that's just fraud, right? And that's just flat out fraud. I would say on the other end, Carlton, at least in terms of kind of what evangelical Christians would believe, I think, the number of conversions and the number of the number of people coming to know Jesus is not. I mean, I have to do my part and I have to work, but it's not necessarily up to me, right? So, if I'm willing and I feel called to go, and so I go overseas, and at that point, I'm just depending on God to be the one to lead me to the people that He wants me to impact. And I think the accountability piece then. I've seen a bunch of different models. Of course, organizations like Campus Crusade actually have, at least at one time, they had an actual worksheet. So every week you had to fill out this worksheet. How many people did you talk to about Jesus? How many, how many of those people came to know Jesus? And so there was actual reporting. I don't think you see that a lot. I guess what I would, at least for the people that I support, because we are supported by people, and then we also support others. We're looking for just more general progress, right? And that indicates that they're at work, hard at work, doing their ministry. And I mean, the example that I think of is William Carey, which you may or may not be familiar with, but he went in the 1800s from England to India, and it was 7 years. He was diligently doing ministry and saw no conversions during that whole time. Now, a big part of that was the culture and the people that he was trying to reach out to, and so it just took him a long time. And you wouldn't say that he wasn't doing his work and he wasn't working hard. I mean, he was working extremely hard and praying diligently. And, it's, you look though, after that 7 years and the first Indian came to know Jesus, that Indian began reaching others, and then his ministry really began to flourish. So, he couldn't have had that real fruit of the ministry without those first 7 years. Right.
I appreciate what you're saying, Mike. I do. And this is I didn't want to ask the question because I feel awkward because I can see both sides of this. And so, it's hard to press one side without kind of feeling guilty on the other side. But it does seem though, right? I mean, the counter argument I think is that if I have a business, I hire a marketing person. I'm hiring a marketing person to get conversions. They can work 8 hours a day. They can be on Twitter, Facebook. They can be everywhere doing everything. They could be working their ass off. But at the end of the month, if they don't have any conversions, they're going to get fired. And yeah. I mean, that's the bottom line. That's why I hired them as a marketing person. And so I there's a part of me that can say that, but shouldn't that be, right? Because we treat missionary work as a business. Well, if it's a business, it has to have a product. And if the product is converted souls, then if a missionary is out there, even if he's working his ass off, pardon my French, all day long, for a month or 6 months, right. If he's not produced anything, and I understand that everybody you talk to is not going to convert, just like the marketer understands every person that they talk to is not going to be a converted buy. But it would seem that if you're out there 6 months or a year and you've not produced anything or minimal, then isn't it fair to say that maybe we should rethink either giving that person more funds and or maybe that person should be rethinking, whether they're in the right place at the right time doing maybe they'd be more suited to a different job. Because clearly, I'm sure you guys know missionaries who, best intentions aside, are just crappy missionaries. I hate to say it, that way, but they're clearly not suited to do what they're doing. Some
say that about themselves. Jamie, the very worst missionary, right? she's a fun, witty missionary. I really like the question. I would bring it back one step though and say our job is not to get conversions. Okay. Let's think of the marketing agent as someone to get to put the product in front of people, and then conversions happen automatically. I do, however, really resonate with what you're saying. If someone is just going sporadically, you don't know their intentions, you don't know their integrity or validity of their calling or whatever you want to say. Basically, if they're good missionaries or not. we should be looking, and I like just going back to Van and Walt's statements here, through relationship. I think that really is the pivotal point where the failure is seen. $100 in donation, pass it on, give it to David in Taiwan. Oh, wait, that's Thailand. Really, they don't know where I am, and because there's no relationship. And so
wait, did I send my $30 to the wrong person, David? Can I retract that?
Man, you sent it.
I'm sorry.
You sent it to Taiwan.
I didn't see if it was Thailand or Taiwan or Tanzania or whatever.
So, but you see, I mean, if you have this relationship, then you can see you're not only getting dry reports like, talk to this many people, marked off how many X's, conversions. You're seeing a relationship, a growth of the bloom, say, of a seed that, yes, Mike's saying takes time. Sure. It doesn't just go boink, 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 and there's your rice, everyone. If you're planning for 1 year, grow rice. If you're planning for 10 years, grow trees. If you're planning for centuries, grow men.
But is that?
But still,
I know
you got to look for quality men.
I do. I see the other side to this. I guess I'm
doing the best I can to answer your question. Give you
a break, huh? No, you did. You guys did a great job. No, I don't think it's a question that has an easy answer to it. I really don't, because I think the other side to that, right? I guess I'll play the missionary side. I think the other side to that is we don't want it to be treated like a business. It is, in a sense, like you said, building relationships. And I think as soon as you start bringing the bean counters in, then I think you lose what's at the heart of the whole process, because then it becomes, like you said, okay, how many we got on this line? How many we got on that line? You get this percent because you got 20, you get 30% because you got 40. Once you start doing that, right, this is, you know what it becomes like? It becomes like students where now we teach to the test. So if you reward somebody based on number of conversions, then people will find ways to get fake conversions. They will find a way to jury rig the system in their favor. So I think there is a risk doing it that way as well. But it was just a question.
Yeah, no, I like the question. And just to kind of bring it back to the center of what we were talking about here, the everyday life of missionary. No, this is part of it, the everyday life of missionary. These are things that if you're going overseas, you got to be thinking about and considering. I mean, people are going to be raising money. Are you the kind of person that they can entrust their hard-earned money to, and for what purpose? And as you learn languages, you cross cultures and et cetera, I would take to heart this whole conversation with Carlton, Mike, and myself, and everyone else previously. Yeah, I think they're great questions. We had actually, Craig had a bunch of other ones. They only have an hour in that room. We talked about language learning, adjusting to new culture, getting along with your team, getting along with the people you are reaching, getting along with the government we didn't get to, and coming home, or what's called re-entry. Not an easy task either, but we'll get to that next time. All that, I know you can hear it in my voice, Carlton, but I'm getting ready to sign off.
I can.
You can hear it?
Can I get in? Could I get in one quick one? Can I get in? Just one more quick one. A different topic. Just a quick.
But when you say one more quick, I hear 5 or 7 more.
Do you really? I promise only one. I promise. And we can postpone it until next week. I'm just curious.
Let's go. I want to hear it.
Somebody brought up children. If you're in China for a protracted amount of time, or any country, if you're there for 20 years, and you have your child, when you first get there, really, and I don't know how much time is in and out of country, but it seems that really your son or your daughter at the end of the 20 years is not a product of American culture. They're a product of some hybrid of Chinese culture and their immediate family. Does that hurt them in any way? Right? Because then all of a sudden they come back to the States and they are very, maybe socially, I don't want to say awkward, but they clearly haven't been in the mainstream with everybody else who's now their age. Is that difficult for them to re-identify themselves when they get back to the States?
Mike, your children were older when they came back, or no?
Yeah, no, actually, no. And we were in China relatively for such a short amount of time and they were so little.
Oh, I see.
I guess what I would say is about that, my quick thoughts about that is that, actually the missionary kids that I know are generally what would you say? Not better people, but they're better. They're more mature when they get to college age. They've had to do more things than maybe their other American counterparts have. I mean, just having that overseas experience, and I mean, they're just very well-rounded people. And so probably the one area that I've seen that where maybe they I mean, they're very mature. On the other hand, when you get to an American college, I think there's certainly scenarios and cultural kind of things that they're just not as familiar with. So they have to, it takes them some time. Actually, we've got some really good friends who live in China, and their kids are beginning to kind of go through college, and the kids themselves have kind of figured out how to do that is there's a large amount of international students at their college. So they've just been hanging out more with them. And so it's like, grew up in China, and I'm with Chinese students in the States at my college. And so generally speaking, I think they're much more mature and well-rounded, and whatever they need to learn, and as it relates.
Oh, I'm sorry to cut you off. I was just going to say, but the statistics go both ways in that children of missionary kids, we'll call them, third culture kids, come off the field. They're either really rise to success stories or kind of struggle, maybe crash and burn. And because they are perhaps more culturally inept, they don't know how to get along in cultures, and they're struggling. Again, this depends on age. I mean, if it's a time of pubescent age, this might not be a very easy transition for them. But I would agree with Mike. In general, I think most MKs or TCKs end up going through a struggle of identity later to thrive as multicultural kind of people.
Okay. I don't have any more questions. I promised. Yeah. That was just that one.
No, I mean, this has been great, guys. I got to run too. And,
me too.
But yeah. Hey, Mike, thanks for being on here, buddy. I only see your audio, so I don't know if that's me or you, but
it's a good conversation.
Yeah. Yeah. And Carlton, thanks for joining, man.
Always fun, man. You guys are the greatest. I appreciate it.
Yeah. All right. Well, we'll talk to you guys tomorrow or the next week.
All right, bud. Take it easy. Take it easy, Mike.
Okay. All right.
All right. Great.
All right.